Picture this nightmare scenario. You're hosting friends for the big game. It's neck and neck in the fourth quarter, and suddenly you realize you're out of drinks. Don't panic, because you can save on a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits. Then get them delivered to your watch party with Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com. Must be 21 plus, not available in all locations.
Hello and welcome to the 1865 match report as we look back on Forest's goalless draw at Bristol City in the fourth round of the FA Cup, which means that the teams will now go to a replay probably on Wednesday week at the City Ground. Overall, it wasn't a sparkling performance by any means from Forest. It was solid with a few moments, but I think on the whole, the travelling Forest fans will think that was a game to largely forget. It's Steven here, and I've got George with me. George was one of those travelling fans to Ashton Gate. And yeah, George, it could have potentially been a really difficult night for Forest, actually, knowing what Bristol did to West Ham in the previous round. And you could see why they caused West Ham so many problems. But actually, Forest coming out with a draw and a replay perhaps isn't the worst result on the night.
No, it was certainly never going to be an easy game. You mentioned the West Ham games, and Bristol were, they were confident to play their football, much for Blackpool. Neither team sort of resented and were scared of the Premier League team. Both sides, took the game by the scruff of the neck and really made it a very good cup tie. I think cup runs, very good cup runs often don't start the best. You very rarely get a side that waltzes all the way through. I think Liverpool a few years ago, I think they beat Norwich. But they only tightly beat Norwich. Then they came to the City Ground and got a scrappy 1-0 win against us, and they went on to win the Cup. So I'm not saying Forest is going to win the Cup, but I think having two cup ties that have gone to replays, isn't the worst thing in the world. But I think a draw was probably justified. Forest take the positives, the clean sheet, only no shots on target for Bristol City conceded, which hasn't been coming really under Nuno. So that's a big positive. And yeah, I think Bristol edged the first half, especially in possession. Forest maybe the second half once Gibbs White came on. And then we had that free kick at the end, which we'll come to, which pretty much summed up Forest last night. So yeah, we'll take the draw and we'll go back to the City Ground. We've got 3 consecutive home games if it's in that period now, and we'll look forward to that.
So let's have a look at the Forest team news. And they were unchanged from the defeat at Brentford last weekend. One change on the bench, though. Morgan Gibbs White back among the substitutes, back in the squad, and that was a boost. Wasn't deemed fit enough to start, but that meant Forest went with a 4-2-3-1 again with Matt Turner in goal, Gonzalo Montiel, Omobamidele, Murillo, and Nuno Tavares, the back four. Yates and Mangala sitting in midfield, and in front of them, Dominguez, Danilo, and Hudson-Odoi with Chris Wood up top. And then on the bench, we had Vlachodimos, Worrell Williams, Gibbs White, Toffolo McKenna, Aguilera, Asong, and Gardner. So a boost to have Gibbs White back, but no real surprises there in the team selection. I think the big one was just keeping Matt Turner in goal, wasn't it? Rather than switching it back to Vlachodimos, which had happened for the Blackpool Cup games earlier on.
Yeah, I don't think we were expecting many changes because A, there's not that many options, and B, we don't want to sort of disrupt the football that's slowly starting to flow under Nuno. And with the keeper situation, I think Nuno rightly gave Vlachodimos those 2 Blackpool games to try and prove himself because Turner was sort of the number one when he came in. But he did nothing to nail that down. And I think Turner has probably been played better under Nuno despite the few blunders in possession. And I don't think it would have worked, flip-flapping, choosing cup, giving this keeper the cup. And I think we've got to give Turner a good run of games so he can really get his feet under the table and start having confidence. And whether we end up bringing a goalkeeper or not, if Turner has the confidence that he's the number one until that, it's only going to be positive. The one sort of thing I would have liked to have seen maybe is a bit of height in defence, because I think we struggled against Brentford with balls into the box. And Murillo, bless him, I think he needs a rest, in fairness. I'm not saying he was poor, but I think he needs just a game off, a game to sit on the bench by the sidelines. And when you've got Worrell and McKenna, who've got experience of playing against championship sides ready-made, and who really haven't really had much of a chance under Nuno, I was expecting sort of one of them to be starting. But no real surprises with the team news. And yeah, well done, Nuno, for sticking with his men.
the game started with Forest almost looking to contain Bristol and, dare I say it, play a bit of a low block, a favourite word that we used under Steve Cooper. And as a result, Forest didn't really look too convincing in that first half at either end of the pitch. And it was Bristol City who were doing a lot of the running and trying to create more of the chances. There were a few opportunities where they got in behind and forced blocks and clearances from the Forest defence, who actually dealt pretty well with any potential threats coming in. The first attempt for Forest came about 15 minutes in. It was a free kick sort of out on the right-hand side, bit of an awkward angle. So I think the expectation was that was going to be put into the box and swung in as a cross. But Tavares tried to have a go from an acute angle, trying to catch the keeper out, but it went just wide. And then Bristol went up the other end, and it was Mehmeti, their left winger. He'd had a good game against Montiel in this first half, actually, and our defender was struggling a little bit against him. Got him down the left, squared it for Ryan Conway. He first time got his foot to the ball. It was quite a powerful effort, actually, but thankfully for us went the wrong side of the post, and you could just sense Bristol were trying to build a bit of momentum and get a bit of an atmosphere going there.
Yeah, they were. That was a real huge chance for Forest that they were looking up to concede. I guess the game started with both teams sort of standing off each other and sort of trying to find out how to play. But then Bristol were the ones that started to pair after that. That Nuno free kick that was pretty abysmal. They grew, and that chance you mentioned, Mehmeti into Connolly. I mean, Dominguez does not track his runner, and I think as a right winger he's done quite well. But Montiel goes out to track the fullback, and then the run is clear from Mehmeti inside. Dominguez is stood there, and he does not track the runner. And it was clear as day that run was going to be taken and that there was space there. And, that was such poor sort of backtracking from Dominguez, who, as a winger, you'd think his best, as a midfielder on the wing, you'd think his sort of positive and his strength would be defence-wise. But how he let him just saunter past him was, atrocious defending from him. And then obviously missed the shot. But, yeah, Bristol were just passing it around like Forest weren't there at times. I mean, I said to my granddad at half-time, you mentioned that, it was almost like watching Forest under Cooper again with the low block, scared to win possession. And even when we sort of won balls in areas that Nuno would like us to, on sort of the edge of the box, but with the pitch ahead of us, we never really broke out. And it was like Wood was fantastic in the first half. We conceded countless sort of free kicks. And it was worrying the amount of times that they sort of strolled through our channels like we weren't there. There was a chance early on, and their centre-back just sort of drove through the right-hand side. I think Danilo slipped over. But then it was like just walking through a parted sea. And Forest, they were a bit all over the place in the first half. And like I say, they conceded quite a lot of free kicks and set pieces that Chris Wood was the only one that looked like he was going to win a header. He was the only one that was sort of an outlet to get us on possession. But we did struggle to keep hold of the ball first half. And I think the stats were only about 55% to Bristol in possession, but it felt like a lot more.
Yeah, and it was quite uncomfortable to watch at times, the way that Bristol City were getting in behind. And you mentioned there as well the opportunity, which I think was their centre half.
Yeah,
driving forward. Through. Yeah, and it needed that block from Murillo to stop the ball coming in. Forest did have an opportunity. It was a ball dropped to Ryan Yates on his left foot. He had a strike, which was quite comfortably saved by the keeper. And then just before half-time, Bristol were on the attack, but Murillo got in and intercepted a pass. The ball went to Chris Wood. He carried it forward, laid it off to Callum Hudson-Odoi. He then looked to cut in, having carried the ball down the left-hand side, rolled it to the edge of the box for Danilo, and he had a first-time strike, which went just wide, clipped the side netting. The Forest fans in the stadium thought it was in. It did. I can imagine from your vantage point, it would have looked very much in the back of the net. But it was opportunity missed, and that would have been 3 goals in 3 for Danilo had that one gone the other side of the post.
Yeah, I think there was many false celebrations around me, and the ball sort of hung in the net. So you're like, is it in, is it not? Then we were sort of trying to gauge if the players were celebrating or not. And then obviously it wasn't a goal. But those 2 chances that we had, Dominguez with that ball in and then Hudson-Odoi later in the half, they were the only 2 times that we had wingers that got balls into the box, because the rest of the time, Dominguez especially would just cut back and play the safe ball. And that's been a key issue, I think, of Callum Hudson-Odoi's tenure on the wing, the fact that he just too often takes the easy ball. But yeah, that chance late on with Chris Wood, I mean, you can see the confidence that's flowing through him. It was the first time, like I mentioned, that we won the ball in a very sort of transitional position. and we got it forward straight away, because we did it a few times, but then just played it square, played it backwards, and then didn't get anywhere. So Chris Wood gets it on halfway, and it's a fantastic run forward. Hudson-Odoi did well to back him up, and then obviously found Danilo, and his shot was into the side netting. I mean, I don't want to be too harsh on Danilo, but last night, particularly in the second half, it wasn't the best performance from him. I think going forward, we know what he offers, but in that sort of sitting defensive role on the ball, he made countless mistakes. He was out of position, and I think Forest midfield wasn't the best. Obviously, that was tried to combat with the changes we'll come to at half time. So yeah, first half that Bristol sort of dominated, but Forest still created some chances to win, to get ahead rather. And we couldn't be too disheartened, and 0-0 was certainly justified, I guess, at half time.
The 1865 match report.
2024 is upon us, which means a packed schedule of FA Cup, AFCON, and of course Premier League action. Beat the January Blues and watch every game with the atmosphere it deserves down at your local Green King Sports pub. Don't settle for a dodgy stream. If it's on the telly, it's on at your local Green King venue across their huge HD screens. Huge. If you download the Green King Sports app, you'll also receive 10% off every single drink whenever there's a game on, and you'll also be supporting us here at 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. If you're doing dry January, then Green King venues also offer a range of low and no alcohol options, so you don't have to settle for a worse sports watching experience.
We all have that friend who wakes up early to go get everyone McDonald's breakfast while the rest of us sleep in. This is your sign to thank them. And if you're that friend, this is us saying thank you.
Just a friendly reminder that right now, get any size iced coffee before 11 a.m. for just 99 cents. And a satisfying sausage McMuffin with egg is just $2.79. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer or combo meal.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Forest did change it up at the break. We had a couple of changes. We had Morgan Gibbs-White coming on for Nicholas Dominguez and Nico Williams for Ryan Yates. Now, the one with Yates is knowing that he was struggling against Brentford and came off, whether there was a reoccurrence of whatever he picked up there. But it looks like it was more tactical from Nuno, this switch.
Yeah, I think Williams and Gibbs-White were two players he wanted to just get on the pitch. Williams to maybe provide more width that Dominguez didn't, and then Gibbs-White to sort of link the midfield. And he took Yates and Dominguez off, the two players that had been booked. So I think that probably had a contributing factor to that. And Gibbs-White was what we were missing in midfield, because particularly when you play players like Mangala, Danilo, Yates in midfield, they're all players that like to play with the pitch in front of them. They can't really play in tight spaces, and we missed Gibbs-White in there to dictate the play, to nip into tight spaces and do little 1-2s. And instantly in the first 10 minutes, you could see the difference when he came on. We didn't really create any chances until about 60 minutes, but you could see that there was a lot more confidence in the squad. I mean, it was just a safety blanket really for most Forest players, because they would, I spoke to you just before we started recording, and it was like when Clough used to say, give it to that fat man on the wing. Forest would just give it to Gibbs-White and hope that he would be able to do something. And I'd say that probably maybe 40% of the passes that he made were in the first 10 minutes of his time on the pitch, because he was just everywhere. And it was good to see him back. I think is what we've been missing. Obviously, he's only been out for a couple of games, but I think we've missed him quite clearly in the games that we have. So, yeah, it was really good to see Gibbs-White on there. And then Williams, I think, just provided a bit more pace and a bit more support for Montiel, because that winger with Montiel and Dominguez was having a bit of a field day. So Williams, with a bit more sort of defensive nous, came in there and helped shore things up. And it was Forest from half-time who really started to dictate and look the much better side.
And yeah, Gibbs-White coming on really made a difference. Forest just looked a better team when he was on the pitch and looking for the ball, looking to make things happen. And with his energy and his craft in there, you really notice it when it's not there, don't you?
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest compliments I think you can give a player, isn't it? That when they're not there, you notice them. And, he's just like the glue in the midfield. I mean, we've missed Elanga, we've missed Awonyi, but in the end of the day, we need players to serve, those type of guys. And Gibbs-White is that guy. And he's probably the one guy in the dressing room that we don't have anyone similar to. I mean, Elanga is Hudson-Odoi, not the same player, but you can put him in that position. Taiwo Woods came in and done fantastically. And if Taiwo was fit now, I think he'd have a big competition on his hands to get back in the side, because it's very hard to drop someone like Chris Wood. But Gibbs White, I think, is the one player where when he's not in the side, you can notice, because there's no one like him. I think Aguilera maybe was unlucky. I didn't mention this in the selection, but I thought maybe it was a game that he could have started, because I think while AFCON comes back, the players come back, and Gibbs White obviously is back fit again. It was probably maybe the last chance that he was going to have to get a start and to get some minutes. So I thought maybe he was unlucky, because he's that sort of player we maybe could have done with. But throwing him, on a Friday night in Bristol maybe isn't the right game for him, and that's what Nuno was thinking. But yeah, Gibbs White came on and was fantastic and was everything that we're missing. And hopefully against Arsenal, they'll be able to start the game.
Just before the hour mark, Gibbs White was involved. A nice bit of link up between him and Hudson-Odoi. And Gibbs White floated a ball into the penalty area. Chris Wood was at the back post, met it with his head, but it was a simple save for the goalkeeper. He didn't get a great connection on it, Chris Wood. Now, I was watching at home, and on the first showing, I thought it was just that the cross was a little bit too high for him, and it was difficult for him to get the proper connection on the header to beat the keeper. But actually, looking back, and you seem to think this as well, is Chris Wood probably timed his header all wrong and could have done better.
100%, yeah. It's a really good run from Wood, because you could see the space, and Gibbs White, obviously on the pitch, is the sort of player that can see the run, so it's floated perfectly, and then no one goes with him. It's Chris Wood on his own, 6 yards out. And I did some research before the game. I was just bored on the bus, and he'd scored with 6 of his last 7 shots on target. So, I was thinking, right, Chris Wood in this area, 1-0, let's protect the lead. And then it goes to him, edge of the 6-yard box, and he's got loads of time. And then the keeper sort of makes a movement, comes and then doesn't. I think that puts him off, because I think he just tries to sort of chip his header over him into the back post. And in the end, it was one of the easiest catches you'll see a goalkeeper make. I think he didn't realise the amount of time that he had, because he could have even waited, let it fall onto his feet and volleyed it, albeit from a tight angle. But I think that would have showed a bit more conviction than what he ended up with. So I'm not going to knock him, because he's been prolific for us for the past few weeks. But that was the chance. You see Bristol had that chance in the first half that we mentioned. That was Forest's chance. That was their biggest chance of the game. And in a game with very few chances and very little quality, if you're going to win ties like that, you've got to take chances like that.
A few minutes after that, Forest made a change. Nuno Tavares came off and Harry Toffolo came on. He was then involved a few minutes after that, a bit of a scary moment when he misjudged a ball running towards his own goal, and it let Belling down the right-hand side. He cut inside, but Murillo blocked his shot and was there to do his defensive work well. The way that Gibbs White came on and just changed the game, he was involved in a lot of Forest's good attacks, and there was another one shortly after. It was a throw-in which went to Chris Wood. He fed it to Gibbs White, carried the ball forward, and then laid it off to Callum Hudson-Odoi. He then fired a shot instinctively, but it went into the side netting, and that was probably as close as Forest came in that second half to scoring. But again, a nice little moment, some link up between Hudson-Odoi and Gibbs White, and Forest looked a lot more lively, didn't they?
Yeah, and that was the sort of move that I think we've been missing throughout the whole game, the link up between the forward players. Wood coming deep and getting involved in it, and then Gibbs White obviously in the thick of the action. And yeah, Forest hadn't provided that threat or looked like crafting an opening like that for the whole game, and that's emphasised what we were missing, really. So it was a really positive move, and that was a couple of chances in sort of 10 minute spell, and you thought maybe Forest can keep playing like this, keep the tempo up, and maybe try and snatch a goal late on. On the Toffolo thing as well, he comes on and obviously does that mistake. But I've seen a lot of things on social media about Tavares and people not liking his selection. I do sort of get it, because against Blackpool, he came on in the first game and really changed the game at left back. Him and Hudson-Odoi looked fantastic, but since then he's not really done it. But in the Bristol game, yes, he sort of turned down forward chances and was poor on possession, but you noticed him in the game. I know Toffolo, it's hard to come on as a substitute, but you didn't so much notice Toffolo until late on, where he got a good cross in. So I think Toffolo will get his chance against Arsenal, obviously because Nuno can't play, and hopefully he'll be fighting to try and keep that shirt. But I sort of don't join in with the complete bandwagon against Tavares at the minute.
Yeah, I don't think he's looked too bad. He's not been spectacular, but he's not exactly been terrible either. I know new reports have linked him now with a move back to Arsenal to then go and be sold on to Marseille. Now, whether there's a bit of something in that, and it's obvious that Forest still need him in the squad and they need that depth at left back, because it's only really him and Toffolo we've got available, especially with Ola Aina away at AFCON. So I think with the way that the squad is shaping up, and we'll touch on this a bit later as well, that the AFCON and injuries really are affecting the options available to Forest at the moment. 84 minutes, Forest had a corner, and in true Forest style, they let Bristol break from that corner. It went to Harry Cornick. He carried the ball upfield, played it to Bell. He fired a shot into the side netting, but that was a little bit of a scary moment for Forest again, and almost getting caught out with a sucker punch. But a couple of minutes later, and this was, 91 minutes, Forest had an attack down the right-hand side. I think Montiel and Williams had worked well down the right, and a ball come in, but the referee gave a free kick, and it was because Morgan Gibbs-White had been brought down off the ball by Taylor Gardner-Hickman, right in front of goal, just outside the box. Prime location for a free kick. It's a shame we didn't have Ivan Toney on the pitch, because we could have really capitalised from it. But Danilo and Morgan Gibbs-White lined up to take the free kick. I was expecting Gibbs-White to hit it and bend it round the wall right-footed, but it was Danilo, and didn't go well, did it?
No, certainly not. I mean, the free kick, it was just right of centre, so it does shape up nicely for a left footer, I suppose, to hit it. But when you've got a specialist sort of in that position like Gibbs-White, you expect him to be really taking the responsibility from there. I mean, so often from those positions, stoppage time, the keepers want to be the hero, and they often take a step towards the wall side. So I was thinking Gibbs-White will take it, put it at the keeper's side, hope that he takes that movement and gets the goal. I mean, worst case, he takes it, hits the wall, we get a corner, or we get the rebound. But in the end, Danilo, who placed the ball and did look quite confidently as he put the ball down, but he ballooned his shot well over the bar. It nearly hit me on row 24. So, yeah, it was a shot that summed him up and summed Forest up on the evening. Because I think over the course of the game, we mentioned those couple of chances from Pring that he had on the counter-attack that Forest were scared of. And when Bristol got a corner, we're thinking, right, this is panic stations for Forest, because we know when Forest got a corner, you're thinking it's panic stations for Bristol, because we know what Forest are like on the counter and conceding goals from that. So Danilo's free kick, it was atrocious, to be honest. In that sort of stoppage time moment, you've got to at least get it on target and try and keep the pressure on, because I mean, the Premier League stoppage time rule of adding loads of time on has sort of gone out the window. We only had 3 minutes of stoppage time, and it was in the first minute, and perhaps Forest's last opportunity. You've got to get it on target, and to miss it like that was sacrilege from Danilo.
And that was Forest's last real opportunity of the game. 0-0 it finished. And I think overall Forest will be probably disappointed with the overall performance, but 0-0 and a replay isn't the worst result in the world. And keeping a clean sheet as well, I think, is a big one. It's the first clean sheet that we've kept under Nuno. And he mentioned in his post-match interview that he was particularly happy with that clean sheet, because while we have looked good under Nuno so far, we have been conceding a fair rate of goals. So I think having this goalless draw and that clean sheet should be a confidence booster, shouldn't it, for the team?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like we either get goals at both ends or goals at non-ends with Forest, isn't it? There's no sort of in between, maybe apart from the Newcastle game. But yeah, they can take real positivity from it, because it's the first clean sheet since Aston Villa in 13 games, I think, something like that. And Forest actually looked like he'd been a clean sheet. I mean, Bristol at times dictated the ball, particularly first half, and looked dangerous on the counter-attack. But they've only created one real huge opportunity that they missed in the first half. Turner's had nothing to do. The one thing that he did do was come for crosses and claim crosses into the box, where you want your keeper to relieve your defence. And so often this season, Forest's two keepers have hampered their defence and made things worse for them. So it was good to see Turner being commanded in his penalty area. There was a time in the second half where a ball went in, very similar to the goal we conceded against Blackpool in the replay, the second goal that they scored, ball in from the left, that Odysseus got nowhere near. But Turner was there and he was never going to catch it, but he made sure he got a palm to it and got it out for a corner. And that's the sort of thing that you need your goalkeeper to do, to take control, take the initiative. And it was really, solid performance from Forest. It was a very tired defence, I think. Omobamidele had probably his best game. I think on the ball, he perhaps lacks confidence. I mean, in the first half, you could predict what he was going to do. He got the ball from Murillo, looked at Montiel, turned back and played it back to Murillo about 9 times out of 10. But slowly in the second half, he did grow in confidence and he was on the cover quite a lot. So Forest can take a lot of confidence in the defensive display. And on another day, Chris Wood sticks that header away, or Hudson-Odoi gets that shot on target, and Forest go away into the 5th round with a somewhat comfortable cup tie. So you can't have too many complaints about the game. And ultimately, you've got to take the positives. It's another game that we can go to the City Ground and enjoy Forest now. Hopefully, we'll have some more players. The transfer window will be open, so we'll know what squad we have to work with. And as much as we can get new games under the new manager, I think it's always going to be a positive.
Yeah, and with players coming back from AFCON and injury, hopefully the Forest squad will look a bit different by the time they play Bristol again and will be much stronger for it. And actually, this extra game, I know we talk about fatigue and tiredness and you'd rather not have replays if you can avoid them, but it might actually do us a favour because it will help us give game time to some of those returning players.
Yeah, 100%. And you don't know what sort of mental state they'll be back coming from AFCON, especially, Ivory Coast, if those sort of players came back from their home nation having been knocked out of the group stage, then I don't think they would have performed that well, So it's good that they've gone through in the end and hopefully they have a good run. But yeah, it provides an ample opportunity for the squad, for maybe a few more young players to get a shout. But ultimately, I really like the fact that Nuno is taking the cup competition seriously, and he's not a huge fan of the replays, and he's made that quite clear. But he's not going there and disrespecting the competition and putting the kids out. We've got Gardner and a song on the bench and Aguilera to give them a good opportunity. But ultimately, he's taking it seriously. He's going out to win every game. And I think that's what you want in a manager. You want a manager that is going to try and win every game. You don't want to sort of pick and choose when you're going to turn up, And it's nice to see a foreign manager do that because some of them come in and disrespect competitions like the FA Cup. So it's a breath of fresh air, I think, since he's came in, and the chance to work with his players. And players surely prefer playing than training. And it obviously opens up the risk of injuries in games. But I mean, we've had loads of injuries in training as well. So I think the more games we can play, the better.
With Nuno, are we starting to see now the way that he wants the team to set up? Because even though Forest weren't exactly convincing in this game, there were some neat moments of possession and some nice link-up play between the likes of Gibbs, White, Hudson-Odoi. And it looks like Forest are looking to be much better on the ball than they were under Steve Cooper.
Yeah, and it's nice to actually watch Forest play because so many times under Steve, you'd be watching the opposition play and Forest play on the break. But the club did well bringing in Nuno. Obviously, it wasn't the most popular appointment, but I think they wanted a manager that wasn't completely different to Steve Cooper, because if you bring in someone like Graham Potter, it might take a few months to implement the changes that he wants to do. And by then, you might have lost a few games and you might be in the relegation zone. Whereas Nuno's came in, he's got the same sort of similar defensive laurels that Cooper has. We saw the low block at times implemented. And it's ultimately all about being solid. But then Nuno's just came in and allowed these attacking players to have a bit more confidence. He's allowed us to gain possession in some decent areas and drive forward. He's given the players belief and confidence that they can do that. And I think that's why you've seen players like Sangare and Yates used a bit more under him, because they get the ball and look to play it forwards as opposed to sort of playing it sideways. So I think, I'm really impressed with what Nuno's done. Obviously, it's not the best time to be talking about the goal scoring when we didn't score a goal, but up until then, we'd scored at least 2 goals in every game that he's been in charge of. And we do look much more like a threat. So you can't fault what Nuno's done. He's came in, and I think he's been strong with what he wants to get changed. He's relayed that to the players, and ultimately we've seen Forest look a lot more competitive. And I think in every single game that we've played under him, we've looked like we could get something out of. Whereas in the back end of Steve Cooper's tenure, unfortunately, we'll be looking to get a draw in most of the games. So it's real progress under Nuno, and they're small steps, but they're steps in the right direction, certainly.
And with the next game being Arsenal at home in the Premier League on Tuesday night, are you looking for a similar sort of approach from Forest? And are you expecting a similar setup to what we saw in this game at Bristol City?
I would think so, yeah. I think Nuno, he's slowly settling on his starting 11. Obviously, injuries and AFCON, like we've mentioned, have had a part to play in that. I think the key hope for us is that Gibbs White is fit enough to play the full game. I mean, an abdominal injury is what he had, and maybe that isn't as serious as having, a sort of hamstring issue or something. Maybe it's a bit of a quicker comeback, and hopefully he can be fit for that, because I think, like I say, he makes us tick. And when we win balls, because Arsenal are going to, let's not shy about it. Arsenal are going to have a lot of the possession on the edge of our box, and we're going to have to be tight. We're going to have to be compact. When we get the ball off them, we're going to need players like Gibbs White to drive forward, to bring the team forward, and to hopefully carve some chances on the counter-attack, on the transition, which we've looked so threatening under Nuno. So we're not going to go and dominate Arsenal. We know that, and we know our strengths, we know our weaknesses. And Nuno plays to them massively, especially against teams like that. You saw Man United come to the City ground, and the way they wanted to play was nullified by Nuno. So I think he'll have a clear plan of how he thinks we can beat Arsenal or get a point off them or something like that. And, if Gibbs White plays, like I say, I've got full confidence in the lads to get the points that we need.
Let's leave it there then. Thank you, George. And thank you, listener, for joining us. We will be back in your feed with our match reports after the Arsenal game. So do join us then.
Podcast Network.
Treat yourself to a little something organic. Cora's whisper-thin yet mighty absorbent pads have a breathable 100% organic cotton top sheet and are made without fragrance, dyes, and chlorine. 'Cause your vulva's not a hot tub. With patented smart channels for up to 8 hours of leak protection, Cora's got you covered however you flow. Plus, Cora donates period products to people in need with every purchase. Find Cora nationwide at Target, CVS, and online at cora.life.